Kevin, if you want to just take a moment and talk about the logistics, that's fine.
Yep, so we have three public hearings tonight. We're going to start with water and sewer and then move on. From guidance from our law department, how this is going to go is that the presenters will give their presentation. If the commission has any particular questions or concerns, they'll voice them. We'll have our conversation. Then we will continue the hearing until 2 weeks from now, the 21st, where we will come back. During that time, we're allowing the public to access this recorded meeting. So a reminder that this is recorded. At that time, we'll address any questions or concerns. Then, barring any major issues, we'll close the hearing and then the commission will formally vote. So that's our prescription for how to do this remotely and satisfy open meeting laws. So I wanted to put that out there. And like I said in my email, and other folks have said, while you're not participating or not speaking, please mute just in case there's any ambient sounds or anything like that. It'll just help us all out. So with that, I'll pass it over to Chris.
Thank you, Kevin. All right, Stephanie, would you call attendance, please? We're supposed to do everything verbally.
Okay. Can everybody please state your name so I know who's here?
Chris Collins, Chairman. Unmute yourself.
Am I muted?
Juanita Martinez.
Pete Alminas.
Fred Miller.
Okay, those are the members from the commission who appear to be present. The first item that we will be doing is petition ID 5747, which is a notice of intent for Water Sewer Commission for the sewer river crossing. Who will take the lead for the presentation?
Hi, Mr. Collins. My name is Betsy Frederick. I work with Kleinfelder, and we're working with the commission on the project that you just cited. And we're going to lead you through a little bit of that this evening. I did, if it's all right with you, I wanted to invite Steve Frederick. If you wanted to, Steve, if you want to make a few remarks on behalf of the commission, that's fine. If you'd rather I plow through, I'm happy to do that as well.
No, Betsy, I just have an opening thing to the commission. And on behalf of the Springfield Water and Sewer Commission, I just like to thank the Springfield Conservation Commission for continuing business during these unusual circumstances. The York Street Pump Station is an enormous capital project that we're undertaking, as you may have witnessed, by the upland portion of work that's completed to date. The consultants will discuss the details of the submission, and it will be clear that the Water and Sewer Commission is dedicated in its goals and objectives to reduce CSOs, provide redundancy of its infrastructure, and maintain operational flexibility while doing so within the guidelines of the Springfield Wetlands Protection Ordinance and Massachusetts Wetlands Protection Act. Thank you, Betsy.
Thank you, Steve. As you all know, this is a major project with huge implications for overall improved water quality, environmental impact for the Connecticut River in the area. So we're all very proud of the project and grateful to have the opportunity to present to you tonight. I was going to spend just a couple of minutes giving the context for this. I know you're all pretty familiar with this. It's a major undertaking. I did want to update you. I know Kevin's been a little bit involved in all of this, but we have been working very, very hard, the commission, with a lot of the resource agencies involved. We have permitting obligations through the Army Corps for a Section 404 and Section 10 and Section 408 permits. We have obligations to yourselves, obviously, and to the Agawam Conservation Commission, obligations to DEP for water quality search and for Chapter 91 license, and to the Natural Heritage Program for conservation and management permit. So this all has been a very complicated undertaking. This is one of the important first steps. We are obviously aware that we can't close this hearing until the final conservation and management permit's been issued by Natural Heritage. But we're working with them now and hoping that that is going to be something that comes pretty quickly hereafter. So what we're seeking today is to give you an idea about what this project is all about and what the resource impacts are, and answer any questions you have about the technical issues. Once these orders are once we do get the CMP and the orders issued, we'll be able to continue the process and ultimately wrap this up with the issuance of the 404 individual permit. So again, grateful for your attention to this. And I'd like to ask Gus O'Leary, who's been the senior technical lead on the project, to just walk you through a couple of things and share a couple of figures with you to maybe further explain some of the resource impacts.
Good afternoon, Mr. Collins. My name is Gus O'Leary. I'm the engineer of record for this project, for the Connecticut River Crossing project specifically. So I have here, and we'll share my screen if that's acceptable. I have here an overview figure of the entire river crossing project. This includes work in Agawam, so work that we will be talking to the Conservation Commission about on Thursday evening. But this is just generally intended to give the Commission a sense and an understanding of what the project consists of. So in general, this project is construction of a new upland pump station, a new crossing across the Connecticut River with two 42-inch force mains and a 72-inch siphon to replace existing infrastructure, existing crossings across the river, and then expansion of the influent receiving facilities at the Springfield Regional Wastewater Treatment Facility. So that's depicted here on my screen on this figure. We've generally color-coded impacts to resource areas, including bordering land subject to flooding, bank, and land underwater. The crossing itself will be conducted via open cut, so we'll be dredging a channel across the river, relaying the pipe in that channel. We'll be backfilling that and restoring existing conditions with excavated material. Aside from where we will be actually removing coal tar contamination from the upland Springfield Gas and Light Company MGP works. So with that, I will dive into some detail on our second figure here, showing a little bit more clearly the area within your purview. So this is a zoomed in figure, again, showing that area that we're impacting, the again, upland 100-foot wetland buffer, 25-foot riverfront area, bank limit at the mean annual high water line, mean annual low, and land underwater. It's a little bit difficult to see. I'm not sure how well it comes across the screen share, but the coal tar areas that I alluded to earlier that we will actually be removing are river crossing pipelines that'll be installed by open cut. In detail here, what I'd like to present is how we're crossing underneath of the flood wall and the railroad tracks. So we'll actually be crossing this entire area, the bordering land subject to flooding area, trenchlessly. So this will be a microtunneled crossing underneath of the Army Corps flood wall, the railroad tracks, the community path, and out into the river. So we won't actually be emerging above existing grade until we're into the river, roughly this location between mean annual high and mean annual low. So we do not expect, and we did not reflect in our notice of intent, any substantial impacts at the surface to any of the area within the bordering land subject to flooding resource area. We expect minimal impacts within the bank area, primarily related to installation, supportive excavation, to facilitate retrieval of our microtunnel boring machines. So once those microtunnel boring machines cross under, as I described, they'll need to be retrieved from the river. So we have some limited supportive excavation depicted in order to limit possible sloughing as we excavate to retrieve those machines. And then obviously there will be substantial temporary impacts associated with the excavation for installation of the pipelines. There's the potential for some additional excavation immediately adjoining our pipelines to the north in order to allow for passage of barges, depending on the time of year that this is constructed. As you're all familiar, the Connecticut River gets quite low depending on the time of year. So we've depicted here a limit of work This is the limit of excavation per the contract. So no excavations to extend beyond that. We are showing, and I depicted on the previous figure, additional impacts to the north of this, additional impact areas to the north of this. There are, I should say, there is an exclusion barrier. There are endangered species of sturgeon in this portion of the river, so there's a sturgeon exclusion barrier that extends to the north upstream at roughly a 45-degree angle to the flow in order to prevent impingement, entrapment of sturgeon, and to exclude them from the work zone. So that is depicted on the prior figure. I can pull that up if anybody is interested. That's the short, brief description of the work that's here. More detail was included with our NOI, but at that point, I'll open it up to any questions.
Before the questions begin, I would just like to mention that what you're seeing here right now with particularly the expansion of the land underwater resource area impacts on the basis of the exclusion barrier, all of this has been the result of many, many collaborative meetings with the other resource agencies, particularly Natural Heritage and National Marine Fisheries, with respect to these endangered species protections. So if it had entered your mind as to question why it was that so much of this land underwater was encompassed by this project, it is entirely having to do with that exclusion barrier, but there will not be a construction activity per se within that area that is circumscribed by that exclusion barrier.
Yeah, I did see that in the notice. Now, Gus, as you're doing the cut and laying the pipe, you're backfilling as you go, or you're not leaving the hole, or are you leaving the entire trench open until you have got all the pipe in? Could you just go into a little more detail on that, please?
Absolutely, yeah. So the expectation is that we'll excavate probably no more than about 100 feet of trench at a time. So there is a fair amount of excavation to be done. As I mentioned, we've got 3 fairly large pipes going in. We've got a 72-inch and 2 42-inch force mains. So they're somewhat in like a Mickey Mouse ears configuration, if you will, with the 72, the larger of the 3 pipes in the center, and a little bit lower, the 42s as if they were Mickey's ears above to the left and right, to the north and south, as they're shown here. So the excavation, the process will primarily follow along a prescribed set of steps. So we'll excavate the trench, we'll lay down the 72-inch and make those joints within the portion of trench that we've excavated. There's bedding, obviously pipe bedding that needs to be brought up around that to the level of the 42-inch pipe, slightly higher than the spring line of the 72. Those 42-inch pipes will be set. Again, backfilled. There's a concrete revetment mat that goes over top of those for protection from scour and potential flotation. And then natural material is backfilled on top of that concrete revetment mat, 34 inches or so, 2 foot 10. That process works its way almost like a centipede across the alignment. Excavating ahead, laying pipe as you go, and then excavating a little bit further out ahead, backfilling stuff back in, working our way across the river.
So you're
controlling sediment and actually maybe a little bit more about that exclusion zone. I don't know if you have those figures. I would just like a brief overview of that.
Absolutely. So I'll flip back to this figure here. Apologize while this loads. It takes a little bit. So generally what's shown here, and I have a whole nother set of plans that was submitted with the NOI. They take rather a bit longer to load electronically, but maybe I can describe it here without burdening everybody with that. Generally, I described the sturgeon exclusion barrier that extends to the north here at a 45-degree angle to the flow. That encompasses this area immediately to the north, upstream of the limit of work. So there's not much that happens here. This is generally described as a turbidity curtain. So the opening size in the curtain is small enough to exclude all life stages of sturgeon and prevent their entrapment. That gets closed off, and there is a secondary turbidity curtain that encompasses the entire work zone at this limit of work and downstream limit of disturbance line. That turbidity curtain will serve to control turbidity, as well as there will be within that then bubble curtains to control noise. Does that address your question, Kevin, or do you want to get into the piles and various other infrastructure to support those curtains?
Nope, I think I just wanted to have it on the record that we discussed those measures that are in place in plan for us. Thank you.
Absolutely. So there is some temporary infrastructure that needs to be put in place to support those curtains, but that is, again, temporary. It'll be put in place while it's required and removed after that portion of the work is complete. And
the natural materials are stored outside of the river until you need them to backfill. If that's the way I read the order anyway, correct? That is correct. So this area that's shown here, the contractor laydown area on the Agawam side, on the commission's treatment plant property, this area is reserved for laydown of excavated sediments. It's actually a subset of it is reserved also for treatment of coal tars that are excavated from this area on the eastern shore as well. So as you caterpillar across, do you wait to put the natural material back at the end, or do you do it as you're doing each section? That is ultimately a question of contractor means and methods and what the most efficient means of doing it is. We've not prescribed that method to the contractor in our contract documents, nor have I received that explicit feedback. My expectation would be that the most efficient way to do it would be to backfill completely as you go. So you'll have varying stages of construction within the trench within that limit of excavation. You'll have some portion of the trench that's open, and you'll have a portion of the trench that's just the 72. You'll have that brought up, and then your 42s will be laid on top of that. They'll inchworm their way across, get the buoyancy and scour protection in, and then I would expect that all of the excavated sediment goes in at once. I guess that would make sense, because after this is all back in place is when they're moving the protected mussels, right? And clay, and then they're coming and kind of moving them back, some of them back into the area, if I recall reading that in the notice as well.
Betsy, I may ask you to jump in there.
Yeah, no, I can speak to that. So there's a significant amount of narrative that's been developed for a variety of these other permit submittals as well with respect to critical habitat restoration. So all of this area is considered critical habitat for mucket and yellow lamp mussels. I'm not getting those right. Anyway, two rare species of fresh mussels.
Yeah, it's tidewater muckets and yellow lamp mussels.
Correct. And obviously for sturgeon purposes as well, all of this area has been deemed critical habitat. So we have been asked or required, and will be required through other conditions associated with the conservation management permit, to basically ensure that when we restore this, we are restoring the river bottom to essentially the same condition as pre-construction. So we'll be actually surveying, there's a number of different types of substrate along this trench path. Some of it is sand and cobble, some of it is mostly sand. And we'll be that's very clearly going to be delineated and stored and then replaced in kind in those same proximate areas. So there's a whole sediment management plan related to where we take it from, where we store it, and then how we put it back that will be important for the contractors.
If I recall, it even said that they were going to try to move the yellow lamprey and then try to I think it was going to the north or something with them and Yes,
there's a required, the fresh mussel protection plan lays out specifically the sweeps that will be done and removing as many individuals as are found to be relocated during the course of construction. And then, as you say, confirming at post-construction that the habitat has been restored appropriately for their return.
Betsy, could you just briefly talk about how our permit relates to the conservation management permit that you were just talking about? It sounds like we will remain, we won't close the hearing until that's issued.
Right. So the obligation, the series of sort of the dominoes that I was referring to requires that the natural heritage has to wait, and this is what they're waiting on right now, is a final consultation between National Marine Fisheries and the Army Corps with respect to this critical habitat analysis. There's Section 7 consultation that says that they will come to a determination of that it's not likely to adversely affect these endangered species, both in that case, the sturgeon is really what they're concerned about, not the state-listed species of mussels. But once they've come to that conclusion, and they're very close to it now, we just had a meeting with them today about it, that's important for natural heritage at the state level, because the state cannot she can't issue her conservation and management permit in any way that is less stringent than what the federal government, what the feds require with respect to protecting these species through these various environmental controls like the sturgeon exclusion barrier and the critical habitat restoration. So once that has been confirmed on the federal side, she'll be able to issue her conservation and management permit that says these are the conditions upon which will allow you to, move forward. And those get essentially combined with the notice of intent. It has to be a part of our total documentation. And once that has been completed and issued, that order of conditions can then be issued. And once those order of conditions that I mentioned are issued, then we start the whole process with DEP, so then the water quality cert and the Chapter 91 can be issued. And then when all of that is wrapped up, we get the 404.
So specifically, Kevin, to your question, when we continue this, which we have to continue, obviously, number one, to give time for public comment, which would only be 2 weeks, but we will continue. The motion will probably be made to continue until we've been notified by, I assume it's you, Betsy, that all the other permits have been received and submitted.
Yeah, I don't know what the notification protocol is from Natural Heritage, but it may just be that their expectation is they issue the permit to the commission, and the commission will turn back to you and say, we now have this permit, and provide it to you as documentation for the purposes of your permit.
All right, so wherever they come from, Kevin, we'll be continuing until we have all permits in hand, which will probably exceed the 2-week time limit for public input anyway.
Yeah,
that's my expectation.
okay, thank you.
Other commission members have questions? Gus, if you could unshare your screen now so that we can see the, okay, thank you. If there are no other questions from the commission, I would entertain a motion to continue at the applicant's request to continue this public hearing for a minimum of 2 weeks to allow for public input, and perhaps longer for time to receive the other required permits. And that's not my phone. Does somebody want to make that motion?
I'll make a motion to continue the request for at least 2 weeks or until we receive the proper permitting.
I second that.
Thank you. Now, for the members of the public who may be watching, in order to provide comment, you have 2 ways where you can do it. You can send comment to kchaffee, that's CHAFFEE, at springfieldcityhall.com, or you may also provide comment through a phone link at area code 413-750-3223. Having given that to the public, Madam Clerk, would you call the roll on the continuing of the public hearing? Stephanie, you're muted.
Can I please have a roll call by name to continue the public hearing?
Juanita?
Can I just ask one quick question? Did we have a second on that? Do we need a second?
Juanita
We
seconded.
need a second.
I-
Okay, sorry. We're good. Sorry.
Juanita?
Yes.
Fred?
Here.
Yes to continue. Peter?
Yes.
Yes.
And I'll vote yes. That's 4 in affirmative. This public hearing is continued. Thank you, all of you, the presenters, very much for your efforts and for your clear presentation.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Our second item is petition number 5748, which is a notice of intent for Walsh Park. The Berkshire Design Group, I believe, is going to be doing the presentation.
Yeah, so I'm Jeff Squire from the Berkshire Design Group.
And I'm Doug Searle from Berkshire Design Group.
Great.
Jeff, would you like to
Okay,
begin?
sure, Jeff, why don't you go ahead?
Okay, I'll share my screen. So thank you, everyone, for entertaining this application tonight. We're here on behalf of the Springfield Parks and Recreation Department. We are currently working on the redevelopment of Walsh Park, which is in the Liberty Heights section of Springfield. It's roughly a 10-acre park that you can see roughly the site encompasses on the western edge over to Wilbur Street, Freeman Terrace area. It's bordered on the east edge by 291. And I'll point this out just because this is a good place to see it. But in this portion of the site here is a large pond that really functions as a detention basin and stormwater management controls for a lot of the surrounding infrastructure. You can see in the plan, again, this is the large basin and pond that I was speaking to. Most of the development for the park itself, the more intensive development, is going to occur on the western edge of the park and away from the resource areas. But there is a small section of woodland trail right now that exists out to sort of an overlook at the hillside before it drops off into the pond. And so part of this proposal is to improve that trail that currently dead ends roughly in this location, continue it around into the site. As you can see in this site plan, this delineates the location of the woodland trail that we're proposing to improve. And as part of that, at the existing overlook, we're just proposing to provide a couple of benches, some interpretive signage regarding floodplain and the value of wetlands and their functions. And this is all being coordinated with the Springfield Parks Department for other interpretive signs throughout the park. We've got a pollinator meadow, we've got a wildlife refuge, a couple of other locations on the site where we're going to include some interpretive signage. But this was a location that provided an opportunity to improve some of the existing trails and amenities that are there now. This plan highlights where that edge of pond was delineated this spring. This is the 50-foot buffer line, buffer zone here, and the 100 is out here. And you can see there's a small portion of work that to improve the trail is about 160 feet of square feet of area that would be disturbed or improved as part of this project within the 50-foot. The remaining work occurs between the 50 and 100, and then outside of that and away from resource areas. And again, as I said, this southern portion of the trail is an existing trail that we're just going to improve with stone dust to make it more accessible and inviting to the public. Again, this is just a highlight of or a blown up view of where that bench location is proposed. We've got some silt fence proposed at the top of the bank. Again, this trail is existing up until where the hatched begins. And then this is going to be a trail of similar material, just weaving its way through the trees and grade there with minimal disturbance. And we've got some plantings, again, some landscape plantings that are being proposed as part of the interpretive signage there. Pussy willows, some other floodplain species. I think we've got a plane tree, a couple other species that they're appropriate for floodplains and just provides that opportunity for interpretive signage. And I'll just finish real quickly with just a couple of images of what the site looks like this spring, early spring. So you can see here, this is where the trail wanders out toward the pond, which is in the background. You can see it in this image here. It's a lot of invasive species. There's a lot of bittersweet. The forest is mostly cottonwoods. There's a number of stands of burning bush and some other invasives. So we're going to try to clean up what we can as we improve the trail, but it's really going to be try to minimize the disturbance through the woodland and just create a different experience that's different from the park, which is largely going to be an open field and then playground structures and whatnot to the west and further away. But this was a nice way to bring in some of those elements to the larger park. So I'd be happy to answer any questions. I don't think there's a lot proposed, but certainly appreciate you entertaining this application.
So do commission members have any questions? Now, I heard you say you're going to use stone dust. So is that basically making it pretty much handicapped accessible where it's pretty rough out there?
That's the goal, is to make it handicap accessible.
And how long is that trail?
I want to say it's probably a couple hundred yards in total length from one end all the way around to the other.
I think that's about right.
Yeah.
It's the existing trail is approximately 300 to 400 feet of what is there. It doesn't really have a final destination. Otherwise, other folks are using it in some sort of informal capacity. There's some homeless encampments in the area and a lot of garbage that has kind of been brought in by folks coming in maybe for whatever reason. So we're hoping that by making it a full loop, and as well, the city is interested in having a trash can down there that would be regularly maintained by parks maintenance staff, that it would improve the condition of that greatly, so that it wouldn't be kind of a derelict area.
Could you just briefly talk about what type of vegetation you'll need to remove and buffer for the extension of that? I know it exists down to that point, but to create the loop, what kind of stuff do you have to cut?
So we don't anticipate doing a whole lot of cutting up for this loop, particularly in the buffer zone. Most of what you can see in the survey are really the larger, more significant trees that were identified in that area. What is growing or what may be growing in some of the alignment of the path now is scrubby knotweed and burning bush primarily. But the direction to the contractor is to really work with the existing vegetation and trees to wind this trail through that forest section to minimize the amount of cutting or to eliminate any cutting that would be needed, especially for the larger trees.
Are you familiar with Regreen Springfield?
I'm familiar with the name. Yes, I don't know the.
Okay, because they're working right now. In fact, they've just gotten some grants. They're working to eradicate the knotweed, and through injections into the knotweed itself, which can be done in August and September. And I don't know if you might want to contact them, because you said the report said that there's quite a bit of knotweed in that area.
There is quite a bit. Yeah, especially at this woodland edge, there's a lot.
Right, and by cutting it now would be like not a good time.
Right.
To do it, because it'll grow even faster. But anyway, right. but you could get in contact with them, because they're working on eradicating it in a lot of the parks in Springfield.
That's great. That's a great resource. Thank you.
Do you know Dave Bloniarz?
I do not.
Okay, well, that would be the park department can get you his number, I'm sure.
Okay.
And they're doing it, and he may even help absorb that into his project.
Sure.
But if not, he can certainly give you guidance on how to get the right material to do exactly what Juanita is speaking about.
Great.
Are there any other questions from the commission? Then hearing none, I would ask for a motion to continue this at the request of the applicant for a minimum of 2 weeks to allow for public input.
That's fine.
I make a motion, we continue this for the 2 weeks for the, to allow the public to make comments.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Who seconded?
Fred seconded.
Thank you, Fred.
Thank you. Having been moved and seconded, I will call for a vote. Fred?
Yes.
Juanita?
Yes.
Peter?
Yes.
And I'll vote yes as well. So that is continued. Thank you, gentlemen.
Great. Thank you, everyone. Have a great night.
Our third item is a petition ID number 5749, which is an abbreviated notice of intent of a resource delineation for 1879 Allen, or no, I guess that's the address.
Yep, that is correct. Hello, everyone. Ryan Nelson from R. Levesque Associates. We did the delineation and survey out at this property for the applicant, Mr. Charles Richard. We have submitted an ANRAD application for the approval of wetland resource areas we delineated on site. I'm going to share my screen so you guys can see the plan. So the property is located near the intersection of Cooley Street and Allen Street. If you guys are familiar, it borders upon, I believe that's the Stop and Shop grocery store next door. There's two single-family homes towards the frontage, towards Allen Street. This one would be 1885. This one is 1879. And then there is a parcel to the rear without an address. There's three types of wetland resource areas that were delineated on site. Bank of an intermittent stream, bordering vegetated wetland, as well as isolated vegetated wetlands, which are protected under Springfield's local wetland ordinance. So starting, we'll progress at the, I should say, the source of flows on the property. There's an intermittent stream that starts off-site and it flows across the property. It's a fairly wide channel that is sparsely vegetated, and it was inundated at the time and flowing. And then the stream kind of dissipates out into a bordering vegetated wetland. It bottlenecks at a culvert that is over top of a existing sewer line easement. That culvert outfalls on the other side of the easement. There's a little bit of channelization going on within the wetland, and then it dissipates once again to a vegetated wetland. The flow continues down through the wetland until it is collected in a 24-inch concrete culvert that goes to what we believe is a manhole underneath the Stop and Shop parking lot. Not sure entirely where that goes, but I have a hunch it comes out at a culvert farther north on the property, and that discharges to another stream that continues off-site. Between the wetland and that culvert, there is an isolated vegetated wetland greater than 400 square feet, and there's also one that's partially located on-site and off-site at the very rear of the property. We've shown a 100-foot wetland buffer extending from the delineated boundaries. I think that covers most of the basics. Kevin and I took a look at the site today, walked all the boundaries, and it seemed to be consistent with when I was out there last delineating.
Yep, we walked the entire site. I found the flags reasonable. Actually, the isolated wetland in the middle there was even a little difficult today, just because there was no water in it. But you could see the topography change. But when they flagged it, it was full of standing water. So I found the delineation to be reasonable. All the flags are still there. So that's my only comment on this project.
Just a question, those two houses that you're talking about that are the property, are those the two that have a for sale sign on them right now?
Correct.
Up?
Yes. Yep.
Okay. Any other commission members have questions?
Yeah, I have a question. All those properties on Ellendale Circle there, those are, there aren't any houses on those. Those are just properties, right?
No, those are all fully developed. Yep.
Those are all fully, every one of those.
I believe so, with the exception of maybe one or two at the end, but I believe they all have houses on them, yes.
All right. And so, all right. So the broken line is the boundary. Okay. I see it.
Yep.
That was a project a long time ago that came before the commissions. And I believe, like you said, there may be one lot at the end of the street not done, but the rest of them all have houses. At least that's my recollection.
Right. Yep.
Okay.
And you can see from the topo lines there, like once you get, I don't know if we're looking exactly north. Oh yeah, we are generally looking north-south on this. Once you get to the east side of the buffer lines, it is just a gently sloping upland area. So there was no more like lower pockets or anything like that.
Right.
Do you know what's going to happen on this piece of property, or is that something that?
At this time, some sort of development, but it hasn't been decided yet.
Okay.
Any other questions? I would expect Juanita, just as a follow, that once the wetland border once we establish wetland border, something will come forward in the future, because they'll know that if they want to do anything, they're going to need to come to the commission.
Right.
If there are no additional questions from the commission, then a motion to continue this at the request of the applicant for a minimum of 2 weeks to allow for public input would be in order.
I'll make
a motion that, oh, go ahead, Peter. Go ahead.
I'll make a motion to continue at the request of the applicant for a minimum of 2 weeks for public comment.
I second that.
And Juanita is seconding that. Fred?
Yes.
Juanita?
Yes.
Peter?
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. So that's a 4-0 vote. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Appreciate your time. Take care.
Thanks, Ryan.
Okay, that brings us to item 3, which is certificates of compliance.
All right, I'm gonna present this one in 2 parts. One is the Burkhart Street Sewer Project was a jurisdictional project that the commission permitted, if you remember, There was a partially failing sewer going through a wetland. They had to put in sheeting, de-water, remove organic materials, put pilings into bedrock down, replace the pipe in the same position it was, bring back all the organic sediments, and basically let the site go back to wetland. They have completed the project. If you go out there now, other than the vegetation they had to remove to do the project, you wouldn't know that there was a sewer running through there. It's kind of gone back to wetland, and things are starting to grow back. The upland areas have been seeded and are stable. So the project is substantially in compliance. They submitted their as-built. They submitted their letter from the project supervisor stating compliance. The only hitch that the commission may not be aware of is it's not a hitch, it was just something that happened during the project. They found contaminated soils. So they had to stop the project. They got DEP involved. They got essentially a temporary approval to remove the sediments that were involved in their project limit of work, which they did. So they're completely in compliance with that piece. All contaminated soils were removed and dealt with per DEP's regulations. So basically the site is back to normal. They're in compliance, although now the city and in a way the commission has inherited a little bit of a problem ongoing to deal with the brownfield site. But from the commission, the sewer commission's perspective, the project is complete. So they are requesting a certificate of compliance, and my suggestion or advice is that the commission issue a certificate of compliance for this project.
Thanks, Kevin. Questions from the commission? If not, then a motion to issue a certificate of compliance for Burkhart, is that street or road? Street sewer project is in order. Fred, did you unmute? Thank you.
Can you hear me now?
I did.
I'll make the motion for the compliance for the Burkhart Street.
Yep. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Fred?
Yes.
Juanita?
Yes.
Peter?
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. That's so 4-0. Thank you. Pinecrest, Kevin?
So I'm going to present the rest of these as one motion. 60 Pinecrest Street and all of the Elaine Circle, the 18, 42, 65, and 66 are the thing we've dealt with in the past, that they are outside of jurisdiction but administratively covered by 2 separate order of conditions. So my suggestion would be that a partial certificate be issued for 18, 42, 65, 66 Elaine Circle and 60 Pinecrest Street. I'll issue them separately, but they're all outside of jurisdiction and they're changing hands, so they need the certificate for their title.
Are they in 2 different filings, Kevin?
Yes, so maybe we do 2 different ones. The Elaine Circle is all under one order of conditions, and then the Pinecrest is under a separate.
Yeah, because of that, why don't we do the Elaine, do them as 2 separate votes, because since they're 2 separate filings and they're going to go to 2 different people.
That sounds good.
So is there a motion to issue a certificate of compliance, actually partial certificate, right, Kevin? Because these are really outside of our jurisdiction for 18, 42, 65, and 66 Elaine Circle.
I'll make a motion to issue a partial certificate for 18, 42, 65, 66.
Is there a second? Elaine Circle. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you. Fred,
Yes.
Juanita,
Yes.
Peter,
Yes.
and I vote yes as well. Again, since Kevin described that this is really outside of our jurisdiction, we would need a motion to issue a certificate of compliance for 60 Pinecrest Street.
I'll make a motion to issue a certificate of compliance for 60 Pinecrest Street.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you. Fred,
Yes.
Juanita,
Yes.
Peter,
Yes.
and I vote yes as well. 4-0 for that. That brings us to tax title, Kevin.
Okay, so it's our favorite time of year when we get our tax title review and they find more properties to give us. Let me just pull this up real quick so we can actually call them out. So when I get brought into these tax title meetings, and usually if it's undeveloped land that just for one reason or another has never sold in our auctions, they suggest that we take them on. So my criteria is always that it's in, as far as we know, in good condition and that it abuts existing conservation land. So all of these Stephanie, I'll have to share the actual like street and parcel numbers with you.
Sure, just email them to me.
Yeah, for the official record, but it's Eastside Larchmont Street. It abuts a paper street on one side and conservation land on the other. We have Eastside Lois Street, which abuts existing conservation parcels. We have 3 lots on north side Winterset Street, which abut existing conservation parcels. And the last one is Eastside Newfield Road, which is actually in between 2 existing conservation parcels. So these are all undeveloped, forested, and would just be adding fairly minimal acreage to our existing conservation land. So based upon my review, I would suggest that we accept them from our tax title committee.
Before I ask for a motion, it's the motion, we can take one vote, but the intent of the motion would be that Kevin send a letter for each of those 4 parcels, because I think they'll need a separate letter from the commission.
Yeah, they all will have a separate deed, I think, or actually some of them kind of contain them all on the same thing from the law department. So I suppose, yeah, I guess I don't exactly know, but it would basically be, as we've done in the past, just accepting all these separate lots. So I don't know how you want to do it.
Stephanie, you work a lot in the law department. Should we take a separate vote on each one, do you think, so that
I don't think that's necessary, because Kevin's going to have me list them all out in the comments section.
Okay.
So we could make a motion to accept parcels as discussed.
I will entertain such a motion if someone wants to make it.
I'd like to make a motion to accept the parcels as discussed.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you.
I'll second it.
Fred,
Yes.
Juanita,
Yes.
Peter,
Yes.
and I vote yes as well. So that brings us to the last item, item 5, which is water sampling, and then whatever report Kevin might have, even though. So
Yep.
Go ahead, Kevin.
This is the Connecticut or Chicopee River watershed folks that we've been supporting for the last number of years. Last year we supported 2 sites, and they floated to us again that we could support 1 or 2 sites. My proposal is that the commission use their local wetlands fee fund to support water sampling at 2 sites, and the amount is $425.
For both?
Yep, for both sites.
Does someone want to make a motion to expend $475 from the filing fee account to support these 2 projects?
Just to clarify, it's $425.
I'm sorry, $425. Thank you.
I make a motion, we give $425 for the water sampling of the 2 sites. The Chicopee and,
They're both on the Chicopee River, I believe.
well, okay, the 2 sites on the Chicopee River.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Fred?
Yes.
Juanita?
Yes.
Peter?
Yes.
And I vote yes myself. Kevin, do you have anything, any updates or anything for us at this point? You're muted, Kevin.
Kevin, you're mute.
I did so good the whole meeting. The only other thing I wanted to mention was it's the time of year where we have tree requests. And typically how we approach this is on a case by case, I will get the forester to review it. If the 2 of us deem it something that we feel is actionable, I then get a quote from Northern, then I get approval from the Conservation Commission. And just because of, I guess we're now getting into a rhythm. This is our first meeting, but I was hoping to have the ability, maybe up to a certain, dollar amount, to just, if I consult with, like, say, Chris, that I can just go ahead and schedule this type of work if we all, City Forester, Chris, and I think it's reasonable, without having to go to the commission. And so I just wanted to see if that is something that commission members are amenable to.
Yeah, I am. I think it's, if
And
we come up,
we'll be having a meeting in 2 weeks, right, Kevin?
Yep, that we are confirmed for the 21st at 5 to at least go over the 2 public hearings that I think we'll vote on. Obviously, the water and sewer, we don't know if we're going to be able to.
So why don't we put a formal dollar amount on an agenda that we can vote on it for the next one.
Yeah.
And in the meantime, if something comes up that you think needs to have action right away, I think the commission's going to be fine if between you, the forester, and I, we look and say if there's something that's got to go, and then we'll just report it at the next commission. But we'll put it on for a formal action at the next meeting.
Okay.
that sounds good.
Anything else?
No, that is as far as I can say. That is it. We did it. Thank you all for
And
being
we even got towards the end, we got blue sky from Fred. I mean, it was gray. And then the blue sky came. And a little bit of blue, so it was good.
Fred, are you sitting on your porch? You're muted, Fred.
You're muted.
I almost did it too, Chris.
Are you sitting on your porch?
Yeah, I feel like Al Roker. Still got a little bit of blue sky right there.
Yeah, a little piece there, yeah.
And it wasn't at the beginning, it just came, so it was good.
Yeah.
Well, that's a good sign.
Hey, he has blue sky and Chris has snow, so we're good.
And thanks again to the people from Focus for helping us out.
Thank you.
Yes, Brendan, thank you very much. So a motion to adjourn is in order, and we will have to do a roll call because with these, when we operate this way, everything has to be by roll call. So is there a motion to adjourn?
I make the motion, we adjourn.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Fred?
Yes.
Juanita?
Yes.
Peter?
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. Thank you all, everybody. Brandon, thank you for the help with Focus. And
thank you.
Stephanie, thank you as always.
I'll get these out before the next meeting so you can review.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay, bye.
Good night,
Bye-bye.
everybody.
Bye.